and welcome to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. And I'm your host, William Chow. And today I'm going to give you a little bit more of a history episode and go back into the archives of the non-digital camera and give you the start of the anime scene before the internet and at the very beginning where anime clubs were forming. Now, as I commented in previous episodes, a lot of people, when they first started being interested in anime, they were having problems finding places to get the anime, places to talk to other people who are interested in anime. So where do you go? Well, some people, they will go to, for example, I went to a comic book store and got some information and met other people there. But some people may end up going to a fan club. That's another way that, we started with the Vancouver Japanese Animation Club. You might go to something like that. Well, another place is if you go to a university or a college or a school, there might be a local club that is interested in anime. Now, we're not talking like the same thing as the episode of the OC where Steph tried to set up his own comic book club, but that is a start because those are places that could possibly have people that are interested in that kind of genre. Anime, spans a large number of different genres, which may include comics, it may include video games, it may also include board games and in this case war games. And so I begin that sort of story with my own personal story. When I came down to Vancouver, one of the main reasons why was because I was beginning to attend the University of British Columbia, and one of the first things that they had during the beginning of the year during student days is the promotion of all the different clubs that are available to the students. And so one of the places I decided to join, and I joined a couple of different clubs, but the ones that really helped out the most is the UBC Wargamers and the UBC Personal Computers Society. Okay, there wasn't an anime club particularly for this particular university, and even for SFU at the time, they had a club called Altered Reality. But again, at that time, it was more focused on gaming, like more Dungeons and Dragons and actual board gaming, what I guess what you would refer to as something like Warhammer or miniature figure gaming in that sense. UBC was much the same, though. The UBC Wargamers Club had different, occupied a fairly large room with lots of smaller offices, which housed many different other clubs, including the Sci-Fi Club, the Chess Club, okay, and of course, they had their own sort of, war gaming, which is like, sort of like a map type of things like Global War. They would play things, which is more specific for, large games like Risk and those type of, battle type games where you're talking lots of infantry and tanks and that kind of stuff. But also in that little sort of corner, they also had the Personal Computer Club. Okay, and at this time, as I mentioned in an earlier episode, if you were able to get, to be part of one of these, shall we say, computer nerdish type of clubs or groups, you had access to this new thing called the internet. Okay, now, of course, most of the internet, again associated with, people at this time were all, again, in this case, based off of the university. So a lot of the addresses and the things that you would get from the university would be all, ubc.edu. Okay, but there was a couple of free ones out there. One of the most popular ones at that time was whimsy.bc.ca. It was kind of like a a personalized, sort of like a BBS sort of system where people could have emails, but they also had access to all the different sort of Usenet groups that were available. So it was much like a very starter version of, let's say, one of the, like a 2chan, 4chan, 8chan, Reddit type of board, okay? And you were able to get into that thing even as long as you had a method to dial up and get into the system and to the server. Now at this time, the computers weren't really fast. I mean, most of the things I had at this time were the Apple II series of computers. The Macintosh SE was one of the first Apple's the Macs I picked up at this time, and and I still remember one of the first external modems that I picked up at this time was the 2400 baud USR robotics modem. Okay, so we're not talking very fast dial-up speed. We're talking mostly text. We're talking about things that sound like your fax machine does nowadays. There's lots of whistles and tweeps. Okay, but that's how we communicated, and that allowed you to reach, at least communicate by text and by writing messages to each other around the world. And by being part of this, computer club, that also introduced me to other people that were, at least partially interested in anime, but that's not their main focus, because again, at this time, the main focus about these personal computer clubs is basically trying to get people more familiar with and try to hook up people with things like software and whatnot for their Apple IIs. And at this time, we're still talking 386 computers, probably not more than 25 megahertz in capability right now, and things like that, Amigas, 500 or thousands at this around this time, and the Atari 520 STs around about this time, Commodore 64s, obviously. These are all these type of personal computer club user groups are out there. And again, that was at the time one of the places that you could ask and probably inquire about different things like animation and also comics and that kind of stuff as well. Most importantly, I'll mention two key people that ended up showing up in my timeline. The first one is a particular Daisuke Suzuki. He met him at UBC, and he was this Japanese fellow he spoke fine Japanese, but he was also very interested in Japanese animation, and he got me more and more interested in that in Japanese animation. One of the cool things that he used to always do is, while he was reading manga, and he reads some different mangas and some strange ones, but he would literally hold the manga in front of your face and actually read and almost voice act the dialogue for you as you read it on the page. And he got so excited about different types of titles, and that it really was infectious. I remember when we went down to the San Diego Comic Con and we met Robert Gutierrez from Ranma Project, and Daisuke was literally doing the same thing. He was reading "This is Greenwood," Kokoro Greenwood, to him, and he got him so interested at all these funny things about this very esoterical manga. Most people probably don't even know what Kokoro Greenwood is, and it actually is quite a funny anime that most people would have missed and would have totally lost over if it wasn't for the fact that Daisuke, one of his esoterical favorites, got certain people interested in it, and we fan-subbed it, and it became kind of a cult classic, and it is now has been released as Here is Greenwood. You might want to check it out. Again, this is a partial story of how we got into Greenwood. So there are more of these little tiny stories. So you want to click subscribe, and we'll get into more of all the other different TV series that we get into, especially the ones that are, shall we say, Daisuke influenced. Because, for example, I would have never ever gotten into shows like Miracle Girls, Himi-chan's Ribbon, and definitely Red Riding Hood Cha-Cha. With a title like that, why in the hell would you want to subtitle something that basically looks like it's made for kids? But with, again, the infectiousness and the enthusiasm that Daisuke picks, and not only that, he doesn't always also pick like the most favorite and most obvious characters. He likes some of the more weirder and esoterical characters. For example, in Maison Akaku, anyone can pick Kyoko as the favorite character because she's the female character, lead filmmaker. No, his favorite character is Yotsuya. Now there we go. So the absolutely strange escapades of Yotsuya. Anyway, so that was the one main person that came. Later, of course, Daisuke became my translator for Arctic Animation, and that's how we got. I'm indebted to how much translation material that he has done, and made available all this anime. I mean, if it wasn't for him, he was the person that gave you the big hurdle to basically hurdle over the Japanese. He's responsible for that. Okay, I'm just the person who kind of helped put it together to help do some timing and get the subtitles out and to get the product out there. But definitely, Daisuke was the one that basically, shall we say, I tried to bring over his enthusiasm for some of these series out and make it available to other people and make other people just as enthusiastic about the same animes. So again, I'll get into more of that, and I'll break it into different episodes for each of the different series. Again, you want to subscribe to that. Okay, the second person that I want to make a mention to in this classic era of time, okay, is again when I was attending UBC, and again, the UBC Anime Club didn't exist at this time. Again, it was the primary contacts I got was from the Wargamer Society, but also in this case the PCC, which is the Personal Computer Club, and through different connections through this Personal Computer Club, and how through the bulletin board systems and that kind of stuff, I ran across a young man named Bill Jang. Okay. What he did for me is when he came to one of our Japanese Animation Club meetings, he was, for the better part, a computer nerd. He knew a lot about the whole entire 386 architecture, MS-DOS, and all this other stuff, and how to do all this fancy stuff. But one of the things that he helped out and did really good is he was up to date with all the things that was going on. And one of the things he was really good at was communications. He was the person who set up and got working for me the prototype generation BBS. That is, he knew how these BBS programs work, which stands for bulletin board systems. It's a program that runs forums. So again, what you're used to nowadays are things like the PHP forums, Reddit, and things like that. These BBS things are basically like those. So I set up a place that we could run one of these BBS computers, and Bill was able to do the paperwork and negotiate with US Robotics to send us a promotional modem if we would set up a bulletin board system to promote their modems. And so I was able to get, through the US Robotics program, this modem to set up one of the BBSs. And I remember, it was available up for upgrades and that kind of stuff. And I remember, we kept on bumping up from a 9600 baud modem to a 14.4. And then, even then they did little small upgrades. So it went up to like a 19.2 kilobaud, basically a kilobaud, with V32 bis and all those other letters that came after it. But Bill did all that, and it was really quite fun because but yes. So what that later basically ensued was the BBSs were able to then take their messages and dump them into larger packages to another bulletin board system, which in that case, that bulletin board system could then post it to another one. And what they would build is these huge networks. The prototype generation BBS belonged to a network called FidoNet. And one of the hubs that we ended up connecting to was something similar to a Whimsy, which was a portal into the internet. So again, our messages could eventually end up on the internet, usually some division or part of rec.arts.anime, and we could also get messages from that also pooled to our bulletin board system as well. So again, that was a big improvement to our communications. Later, Bill came with us down to some of the conventions and that kind of stuff because he was also a comic book artist. And then later on, if you do some searching, he also did one of the Robotech comics. So if you plan to want to, you can Google Bill Jang and Robotech, and you will see what issues that he's done. And again, as a comic book artist. So those are the two sort of again, some entry points on how you can get some anime at our time. Again, computers was a big, huge influence for me. And again, at UBC, getting contacts from both the wargamers and from the personal computer clubs is how it was done back then. Of course, nowadays there is the an actual club for the UBC anime people, as well as SFU. Altered Reality has become more of an anime as well as a wargamers and gaming type of club as well. So again, this is sort of the evolution of how the clubs always begin. But one other interesting thing about it is that you always may all notice that for a longest time, anime wasn't big enough by itself to have its own club, but only with more and more exposure and with all this, with all this translation that has happened, more and more people have been able to are able to access and understand the anime and become interested in the anime. So now they've banded together and joined these clubs and are able to I guess they share a lot of their information, or the things that they read, mangas, and of course when conventions and stuff come, they can do cosplay and do events like that. One of the things that I remembered that was really funny, part of the reason why a lot of people made clubs back then was if they had a certain number of people, which I think is 5, to make a club, then they were able to petition the student union, the student union for some fees or some products, so that they can, or some funds, so that they can buy products. They couldn't say the word beer, so they'd use words such as product, or they'd take the E's out of beer and change it to Z's and make it beers, things like that. And for that reason, you end up with really strange clubs like the PISS, which stood for the Pseudo Intelligence Student Society. Yes, I'm sure that's what they did. Anyway, I'm sure that's exactly what they did after they had lots and lots of beer, funded by the Student Society. Okay, but that's another story, and I'm not going to get into that in another episode, so don't bother subscribing for that. But for those people, again, they wanted to go looking for other types of anime and that kind of stuff, it's easy now that that you can use the internet to search all that stuff. But again, in our time, we didn't have Google, and the internet wasn't searchable in that fashion to find contacts and things like that in your area for anime. So again, you had to go out and, shall we say, mingle with the comic book stores, the game stores, go to some of your local clubs at your school and whatnot, and that's how you got to. So back then, I think anime fans were much more sociable. they communicated with people and they talked to them and were more friendly to other anime people because they were all trying to learn more and find more anime. Whereas nowadays, you know, people can directly find people that are interested in their you know, band of anime or their genre of anime that they like, and they can ignore all the other people so much to the fact that, you know, you can almost have a prejudice against certain people just because they like a certain type of anime. You know, it's like, well, you know, you like Gundam, oh, well, you're one of those people, you know, whatever, you know. But and in some ways that's, you know, a little bit sad because it's that you're narrow casting your you know, the types of anime that you may have influenced in, and in some ways that's, you know, that's a little sad because you might miss certain things that you would have never ever thought of liking because it doesn't, quote, meet your art style taste, your genre taste, or, you know, or even your format taste. You might miss a lot of things, and again, I'll get into another episode of how the shift of animes and how the focus of what fan clubs and fan subbing has now done to anime. Again, I'll get that into a future episode. Okay, again, so below I have my web page that you can click on, and you can view all various different things that I've done, and even some of the game exploits and that kind of stuff I've worked on. You know, probably get that into a later episode when I do some collaboration, and we'll get that in the future. Again, subscribe below so that you'll know about those. The second way that you can participate is, again, I like wall caps, so again, if you want me to promote something from your team, then by all means, again, the address is below. Again, I've got my classic Montreal Expos. I always liked the Expos back then. You know, I didn't follow a lot of certain characters, but you know, certain ones I did, and I'm gonna pull an esoterical character out. From the Montreal Expos, the shortstop, not a big name, but his name was Chris Spier. All right, and the animation I'm gonna recommend to Chris because he was a nice, you know, short, very, very, you know, covered the field very well. Didn't hit really great, but I mean, he was a, you know, I like the name. And he was a, you know, interesting hitter for me. But the one anime I want to maybe suggest to you, and in the same topic for Daisuke, is Ultra Superman R, or Chochukun R. Okay, again, the artwork is done by the same person who does Pat Labor, the manga. Okay, and this is one of the ones that Daisuke pulled out. You know, kind of out about the time that we did Pat Labor, and it was sort of like, yeah, it was a strangely funny type show. And again, if you want to check it out, Ultra Superman R. Okay, it's probably the working title that got released in English. Have a look at that. It's a great anime. So until next time, see you again.